There are some sounds you only hear when no one else is around. The quiet crinkle of a wrapper. The slow click of a cupboard being closed with extra care. The pause, longer than necessary, before a bite is taken. This story doesn't begin at a table. It begins in the spaces between rooms. In the moment someone checks if they're truly alone. Because eating secretly is rarely about hunger. At first glance, it looks simple. A person eating when no one is watching. Late at night, behind a door, in a parked car, standing in front of the fridge with the light dimmed low. But psychology tells us something quieter is happening beneath the surface. Something practiced, something learned. Many people who eat secretly are not hiding food. They're hiding a feeling they don't yet have words for. Think about the last time you wanted something, but didn't want to be seen wanting it. That tension is where this behavior begins. In psychology, secrecy often grows where judgment once lived. Not always loud judgment. Sometimes it's subtle. A raised eyebrow. A comment said years ago and never forgotten. A joke that landed too close to the truth. Over time, the mind learns a lesson. Certain needs are safer when invisible. So the body adapts. Food becomes something done quietly, carefully, without witnesses. And slowly, eating stops being an act of nourishment and start becoming a private ritual. This isn't about a lack of control. It's about control being used to manage emotion. Psychologists call this a protective behavior. The mind trying to shield itself from discomfort, from shame, scrutiny, or the fear of being misunderstood. And the more effective the protection feels, the more deeply it embeds itself. The brain doesn't separate food from feeling. It stores them together. So if relief once came while eating alone, the mind remembers, quietly, faithfully. Over time, secrecy itself becomes soothing, not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. That's why many people feel calm while eating secretly and unsettled immediately after. The calm isn't about the food. It's about the absence of eyes, the absence of expectation, the absence of explanation. For a brief window, the nervous system rests. But relief that comes from hiding always carries a cost. That cost often arrives as a lingering question. Why do I only feel safe like this? And because that question is uncomfortable, it often goes unanswered, which leads to repetition. Psychology shows us that behaviors repeated in silence tend to grow roots. Not because they're wanted, but because they work just enough. Here's something most people miss. Many secret eaters appear highly controlled in public. Disciplined, put together, self-aware. The secrecy doesn't contradict that image. It protects it, but protection can quietly turn into pressure because the mind begins splitting itself in two. The version that's seen and the version that eats in silence. Maintaining that split takes energy. There's a moment before secret eating that most people never notice. It happens before the craving, before the decision. It's the scan. The mind checks the environment. Who's home? Who might walk in? How much time is there? This is an impulse. It's conditioning. When a behavior becomes secretive, it usually means the emotion attached to it feels unsafe in public. For many people, food became emotional long before it became hidden. Maybe it started in childhood, where eating was monitored, commented on, controlled. Finish your plate. Do you really need seconds? Be good. These sentences don't sound harmful on their own, but repeated often enough, they teach the nervous system that being observed while eating carries risk. So the body learns to wait. Secret eating becomes deliberate, almost ceremonial. The food choice is specific, the timing precise, the privacy essential. For many, the secrecy makes the food taste better. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's uninterrupted. No performance, no self-monitoring, no adjustment. Psychologists call this relief eating. The nervous system dropping its guard. But relief tied to isolation creates a loop. The brain starts associating aloneness with safety, and visibility with tension. That's why eating around others can feel uncomfortable, even when no one is judging. The body remembers before the mind does. There's also identity protection happening. People who eat secretly often care deeply about how they're perceived, not superficially, but as a form of self-preservation. Certain versions of the self feel acceptable. Others feel risky. So the eating self goes underground. This creates compartments. Day self, night self, public self, private self. The problem isn't that these parts exist. It's that they're not allowed to meet. And when parts of the self are hidden, shame grows quietly. Not loud shame. Low grade. Persistent. The kind that whispers afterward. What's wrong with me? Shame doesn't stop the behavior. It feeds it because shame increases the need for relief. And relief already has a location. Alone, unseen, quiet. This pattern often intensifies during periods of control. When life looks disciplined, organized, improved, the tighter the structure, the quieter the rebellion. Self-control borrows energy from the nervous system. And when someone has been good all day, something inside looks for balance. Not logically, biologically. That's why secret eating often happens at night, after expectations are met, when the body finally exhales. Psychologists call this permission without witnesses. The mind allows what it would never allow publicly. Not because it's weak, but because it's tired. Food becomes symbolic, relief from being on. But contradictions don't disappear when ignored. They build tension. Eventually, the relief fades faster. The silence feels heavier, and a different question emerges. Why do I only let myself exist when no one is looking? That question matters, because secret eating isn't about indulgence. It's about giving yourself something in private that you don't feel allowed to have in public. The pattern doesn't soften through force. It softens when protection is no longer needed. The real question becomes, what part of me still doesn't feel safe being seen? Change begins with noticing. The pause, the scan, the quiet lowering of volume. That moment isn't failure. It's information. Psychologists call this reintegration, allowing the private self and public self to overlap. Gently, gradually, not through exposure, but through safety. Small, neutral experiences teach the nervous system something new. Nothing bad happened. Safety is learned through repetition. Over time, the food loses its emotional charge. Not because it's restricted, but because it's no longer carrying relief, rebellion, or escape. Eating becomes ordinary again. And that's the real resolution. Not perfect control, not constant mindfulness, but less division, less hiding. The behavior was never the enemy. It was a message that said, I need safety, I need rest, I need permission. When those needs are met more openly, the message doesn't need to repeat. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your mind found a quiet way to cope, and quiet coping deserves understanding. Sometimes the most powerful psychological shifts happen, not when we stop doing something, but when we finally understand why we started. And one day, without effort or ceremony, the door doesn't need to be closed anymore.